Welcome to the Book Carriers, your favorite book club podcast.
I'm Cassandra, the hopeless romantic book carrier.
I'm Angela, the logical book carrier.
And I'm Becca, the sentimental book carrier.
We are three 30-something best friends and busy moms who live vicariously through the stories we read.
So grab your cup of coffee, get comfy, and let's get lost in a great book together.
Hello, book carriers. We are so happy to be back with a new episode. And personally, I am so happy for this episode. I've been long awaiting because we are covering Binding 13, which has become a near and dear favorite series of mine. And so I had these girls pick it up and read it too. And so I'm so excited to talk about it with you guys. One of my favorite series. So how are we feeling?
Yes, super excited. When you suggested this book, I was on it, did my homework, started reading it. But I'm also excited because today's Thursday, y'all, and Thursday is a special day. It is Severance Day. It's National Severance Day. It's not, but it's Severance has premiered, and that I have a date with hubby. We're gonna watch the newest episode. It is so good. If y'all haven't started watching it, I suggest it, highly suggest it. Such a good one.
Yeah, I've seen it all over social media. So I'm like, oh, gotta put this on my, it's not TBR, it's to be watched.
To be watched,
TBW.
You'll have to share with us after you watch the premiere. You'll have to share what it's like and
I'll
tell
share
us more about it.
I'll share like a spoiler-free, more in-depth type thing for y'all.
Exciting.
How are you doing, Angela? Good?
Yes, I'm doing good. Yes, I'm excited to be here. Always a good time to chat with you ladies and to talk about Binding 13 today. So I'm looking forward to it.
I think that Angela's opinion is what I'm most excited. No offense, Cassandra, but Cassandra and I because Cassandra read it first, and so she was texting me just individually, so I already know where her heart is with the book. I'm excited to hear Cassandra's thoughts on certain details and aspects. But Angela, you literally finished the book today or yesterday?
Yesterday, yes, last night.
And so I haven't heard any of your thoughts at all thus far.
Yeah.
And this is totally out of your normal realm of what you normally like to read. So that's why I'm so anxious to hear your thoughts. So
dying to know.
So I'm excited.
Yes.
And I think my first question that I want to discuss, and I think that this will touch on Angela's opinion also, but how did we feel about reading something that was young adult? Because so far we focused on adult, right? I think I mostly read adult romance and adult fantasy now. So how did we feel about reading something young adult?
Which is a really, really good question. And I actually want to go last, though. So I don't want to share my opinion just yet.
Okay.
About YA?
Yeah, I want to hear y'all's thoughts first.
Okay.
Well, okay, then I guess I'll share. YA is very near and dear to my heart. That is along with my reading journey. Shout out to our Meet the Book Carriers episode. But yeah, it's what I grew up with. And so now it's kind of interesting because now I'm not necessarily a YA anymore. I'm getting into the more OA.
You can't just make up acronyms, Cassandra.
You even skipped middle age. I was totally expecting you to say MA, middle age.
Yeah, I guess I should have given myself a little bit more credit, but we'll go with that MA. And now I'm more that's, I don't know, TV mature. No, I'm mature. Yeah, I'm a mature adult, a middle-aged adult. So, but I kind of have mixed feelings about it, especially with characters in this book and their ages. Going into it, I was a little hesitant. Is this still interesting to me as an adult?
Is it still relatable?
There it is. Is it relatable?
Yeah.
And with this book specifically, the characters' ages, it was mentioned a lot in the book.
What was mentioned a lot?
Their ages.
Yeah, It was a point of contention at the beginning for Johnny with Shannon. Yeah,
it was a big plot point, I feel like. So she's 15 at the start of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He's 17, almost 18, super close to being 18. And I don't know if this is necessarily in every single YA book, but it was very much it was spelled out. These are their ages. And even Johnny feels weird about her being much, much younger, especially with him being I'm going to be 18 and she's going to be underage. That was I don't know. For me, that was kind of big. I was just questioning, I was like, is it super necessary for this to be such a big part of the story? I think a part of it was, you know, the parent, like it pissed off the parents that he was older, but she didn't really have to tell her parents that he was older. I don't even know if they really knew. I think like as the story goes on, maybe the mom kind of finds out. So I was like, why is this part of the story so much?
Well,
Other than to keep them apart longer.
Yeah, I have a thought for that just from like an author's perspective. I think that if Shannon was too close to 18, she'd be too close to being able to get out of that house. And that was such a part, was that she couldn't leave and she didn't want to go into the system. So
Yeah.
she had to be a little bit younger. I think for that like plot line to work, they kind of had to be the ages that they were, and him being so close to going off and graduating. But I don't know, it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, was that because like did she have to make them those ages because this was the plot that she wanted, or did the plot form that way because she had them at those ages? You know, so it's like but that's from my perspective. I feel like she couldn't have had the same plot and it couldn't have gone the same way had they been at the same age. So
yes, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think for me, like the age gap maybe makes sense in the way of like Johnny's character. You know, a big part of his character is being disciplined, like having a lot of self-control. And so maybe that plays into it of like how Shannon kind of tested that for him. Like he couldn't control himself around her because the lust or the infatuation was too much. And so I saw it maybe about the plot in that way, like testing Johnny's character and his characteristics.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah. Did it weird you out?
I think that's what it was. It weirded me out because it was mentioned so much. He just was so like he was weirded out by it. You know, he was like, I can't like her because she's like way, way younger. What are you doing, you weirdo? And that put him off for a while because of that simple fact, he was like, no, I can't like her. I can't be with her, but I want her. So why? And so it weirded me out. But eventually, I don't know how I like came to terms with it, or did I just like say, okay, like just forget about it? I don't know.
Yeah, I will say for me, I also agree with you, Cassandra. Like it did weird me out kind of at the beginning and like getting into the story. And so kind of going back to your question, Becca, it's like this was my first YA that I've read, you know, in a decade and maybe longer than a decade, 15 years. I don't know. And so going into this story being YA as a 30-something-year-old woman, it was really hard. And I had to really adjust because I was reading it as a 30-year-old something woman. And I was like, no, this isn't fitting. This isn't working. Like, I'm not enjoying this book. I'm weirded out. I'm getting the ick and like reading about these teenagers kind of getting it on or like leading it to them getting it on. And so I was like, wait, like, let me take a step back and like process this and take this book in as a teenager. Like I need to have like that mindset of like, what was it like as a teenager? Like, what do you typically think about, feel as a teenager? What do you experience as a teenager, as a 15, 17-year-old? And so once I did that and I adjusted like my mindset, the story, I was able to get into it and actually like enjoy it. So that's what I had to do with it, with this being YA.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like your high school experience as a 15-year-old, you are attracted to those boys that are older than you. It's just a natural thing. But then it's like, as a 30-year-old, a 30-something-year-old, you're like, but wait. You're just like, you're just a baby. Like, don't get caught up in this. Like, you know, but when you're in the moment, when you're in high school, there's nothing that can really, you know, give you that perspective of like, just wait. Like, it's okay. You know, he's a good guy. But you know, you're still so young. Like I had that conflict as well, like, you know, being the 30-year-old, but also like going back into like being back in high school. So yeah, it's interesting. You said it perfectly.
Yes, I remember crushing on like this super tall guy like in high school, and because that's the other thing about like, you know, this book. It's like their size difference is also very much repeated, and
Yes.
like every single chapter said something about like the difference in their size, even outside of like their
Yes.
age, like even the physical. Like I think the way it was described, I just kept imagining Johnny as like this humongous giant who's like twice the size of Shannon, and Shannon is like this itty bitty tiny little girl, because it was
Yes.
emphasized so much, and it just, I was like, does that even work? Does that fit? Does, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, she's so small. She's just so small, so bleeding small.
Yeah, so bleeding small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Becca, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, I have always like, I mean, I read YA every once in a while, so it's not like this is the first time I've read it in, you know, 15, 20 years. Like, I mean, I've dabbled in it, gone back and forth. It's not my main that I read now. And, you know, going into this, it was just because I saw hype on TikTok. It was like TikTok was telling me like, I'm like crying. I'm like, you know, this is just such a good. And then whenever I picked it up and I realized that these kids were in high school, I was like, is this the same series like that everybody adult book talk is talking about? So I kind of had to remove myself a little bit, like you guys said, and just be like, okay, imagine this as a teenager. And even though I wouldn't recommend the series for a teenager, I think that it's inappropriate for anybody under 18. But I had to think about like how I felt in high school at that age. And I was the girl who dated a guy when I was a freshman that was 2 years older and dated him all the way through high school. And so he was, you know, into whenever he was past 18 and I was still younger. So like I lived that. And you're right. As a 30-something-year-old, now that I've lived it, I would never let my daughter do that. But at the time, you couldn't tell me any different, you know? And so I think I related to that age gap. Like, I'm not even calling it age gap, but that age difference on a real personal level. So I kind of, when I thought about it that way and from my own mindset, I was like, oh, well, I can see that. And so, and I think I mentioned this in our last Book Yap episode too. I think that the culture also, and I had to remember, you know, this is not set in the Bible Belt of America. You know, this is set in Ireland. And I think that in like the European cultures, they're just a little bit more open to discussing it. So I think I had to also remind myself, like, this is not our culture. This is, you know, and I think once I removed myself from that as well, it kind of helped me be able to be like, okay. And then I was able to sit with it and just go through. And eventually, as you're going, it's like I knew that they were in high school, but I kind of forgot about their age difference. Like once we went, I was just like, okay, like they're not like, I think they eventually mentioned they're like, you know, a year and a half apart technically. And it's like, well, that's not anything, you know? And so I think eventually I just kind of got over it. But I liked the aspect of YA because they were younger. So I think it took, if these characters had been the same characters as adults, it would have just been smut, you know, like that's, but I think because they're younger, she's inexperienced, he has so much control, he's trying to be mindful that she is younger and everything. It's like, it puts that tension there to where like, I mean, it took what 3/4 of the book to even get a kiss. I mean, it was like, you know, so I feel like there was a little bit of innocence there, which was refreshing considering what is normally an adult romance. So, okay, so we've talked about like not reading something adult, but reading something YA. But how did we feel about reading something that wasn't fantasy? Because this is strictly just YA romance, no fantasy, no anything. So how did we feel about that? Angela, go first.
Yes.
You want me to go first?
Yes, because we're awaiting your opinion.
Yeah, it's not fair. It's not fair to go last.
Always go last. Okay. Okay. So this was also, you know, I think in my last 2 or 3 years that I've been back in my reading journey, I've only read fantasy. And the other thing that listeners should know about me is I am on the ADHD spectrum, and that's important to note because sometimes I need a little bit more to the story. So I sometimes do need like the world building and like the magic because it's like interesting and new and unique, and it like has me focused on the story so much more. And so with this book, it took me a while to get into it. And I mean, I kept texting y'all. I was like, I'm not done yet. I'm at 50%. Okay. I'm at 70%. Okay. I'm made it to 80%. And, it just was slower than I think normally it would be, maybe. Just because I think it was missing that extra oomph to like the story, which is like the fantasy aspect of it. But kind of similar to my YA answer, like once I just accepted this book as like a non-fantasy and it's like, okay, this is real people, I started appreciating it as like just human beings and like how we are as humans, like real humans, and what relationships are like in real life. And it still took me a while. I never got to that point of like, I can't put this down, I can't put this down, I can't put this down, but I did appreciate it in a different way. If we have any new listeners, I am a mental health therapist. And so kind of like seeing real people experience like real emotions and like how to navigate family dynamics. I know we'll get to that eventually, how to navigate first love. It's a good perspective to be reminded of what it's like for people and what we maybe go through in our lives.
Yes. What a great answer.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Moving on to the next question. No, I'm just kidding. Because I don't need to answer because that was perfect. Cassandra, you can answer, but
Yeah. My only thing, the only part where I differ is it didn't take me long to get into, and I was at the point where I was like very invested in the story because I liked the fact that it showed just like that human experience. I was able to have that connection a lot more. Obviously, my human experience as a teenager, I have to say, but it had that nostalgic feeling, which I know we talked about in our book yap episode, but that's what I really enjoyed about it. It felt like I was reading the book and I was reading about these teens and their little crushes. And I was just reminded of all of my little crushes and my little moments that I had with teenage boys as a teenage girl, Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of those, I've had some of those moments. It's
yes.
just I had moments like that. The bus moment. Okay, we'll talk about it later. But
I know exactly what bus moment you're talking
about. Many of these moments are moments that I experienced. It just it just took me back. So
I think it was nostalgic because we're reading about teenagers during the time period that we were also teenagers.
Yes.
So it's like for us, we had a totally different even appreciation than if a teenager or let's say an 18-year-old picked this up today, they wouldn't understand it the same way that we do. Or it wouldn't bring the nostalgia the same way that it did for us. So I do think that that's such an important thing to mention, that I think that the time period choice of it was so well done because it really, the era before cell phones and social media, like they had cell phones, but it was like for texting, it was like social media, TikTok, Facebook, like all that wasn't there yet. That time period is just so interesting. And that's what I think, like, because it didn't have the fantasy aspect of it, we had those elements, like the nostalgia and all these things. So yeah, for me, it didn't take me long to get into it. I loved that the characters met so fast in the book and it alternated POVs. I think alternate POVs, especially not in a fantasy world, is necessary for that fast-paced type of reading. I think it can keep a reader engaged a little bit easier. And so I think dual POV, they met so quickly and like it was like, cute. All right, we're already going. There wasn't a whole lot of need for anything before then. And I also think the aspect of them, like the trauma aspect of it is like, when trauma like that happens in fantasy type settings, it's like, okay, well, they're going to use their powers to everything's so amplified because there's magic and so much more can be done. But this is just real life fist beating trauma. And it's like, that is just, it humanizes the characters in so many ways. And so I think that was kind of a breath of fresh air in a way of like, no, these are just real people with real problems, like you said, Angela. So I enjoyed it, but I love non-fantasy. I read a lot of non-fantasy, so I'm a little biased when it comes to that. But I know, Angela, you don't read a whole lot of non-fantasy, and Cassandra, you probably haven't recently either. And so it's like, it was good to hear y'all's opinion of that.
Yeah. So it kind of makes like, it kind of brings us back to our whole like YA and like, was it important for the characters to be the ages that they were? And then as an adult reading this text, is it like, how do you feel about it, right? It's like, well, the author wrote it in a very specific time period. So the people that grew up in this era are now adults. So I feel like it definitely was like she was reaching out to those older readers for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I recognize that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. She was writing for the adults that were that age at that time.
And just like a side note or side anecdotes, I guess. Like, I'm so thankful we grew up in that time period
Oh my
where
God.
social media wasn't so entrenched in our culture. And I hear about it now. Like, Becca, I think you even shared, like, you went to a concert recently and you shared, like,
Oh my God.
how you do concerts now is like you have it on selfie mode with like this bright ass light. And
yeah, literally.
Yeah.
My husband took me to this rap concert, and I was by far the oldest person within 50 feet of myself. And it was somebody that I'm not a huge fan of rap. I listen to some rap mostly through my husband. But you know, I'm a supportive wife, and he wanted to go, so we went. And I feel like the crowd was pretty young, and they just all had their phones, like the rappers singing, and they're just singing to the camera, like along with it. But like they have to capture it, you know, and I'm like, you're missing actually getting to experience it.
That's why I'm so thankful we grew up in that age or that time period, because I feel like if we knew there was always a camera around, we wouldn't feel maybe as free as we did. Like, I just remember us having so much fun, and Cassandra, you mentioned like on the bus and like doing really silly, funny, stupid stuff and just being kids. And like, I feel like if we had knew like the possibility of a camera or ending up on TikTok or whatever it may be, like it would have held us back. And so yeah.
Oh yeah, I think we could do a whole deep dive into the mental issues that social media like will have on today's generations. But I agree, I'm so happy we didn't have that whenever we were that age.
Yeah. And it honestly, it still is a struggle of finding that balance of, you know, not recording while you're experiencing something. I try to not do that. And I try to actively tell myself, you know, take some pictures, but don't get lost in like filming or trying to capture every moment. And, you know, and sometimes I go to the opposite end and I just don't take any pictures. Like, you know, I don't really take a lot of pictures. And so it's like finding that balance is it's rough. Yeah.
It is hard because, I feel like I find myself not knowing where my phone is half the time when I'm in like situation like my daughter's first birthday party. I mean, I'm like, I don't think I had my phone with me the whole time because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. But I was so happy for the people that were constantly taking the pictures because then they sent them to me. So I'm like, you know, you can't have it both ways. Like, you can't expect somebody else to do the work for you or you're not going to have them. And it's so like, it's hard. It's hard. But I think, just having the right balance is utmost importance. But I will say that concert was, you know, it's been a long time since I've been around that many young people, like in mass. And I was just like, man, am I old?
The shock.
Like, yes, but it was just, it was very shocking. I was like, y'all are missing the whole concert. So
MA.
I'm MA. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, how did we feel about Chloe Walsh's writing style? Did you find it easy to read? Did you find it like lagging? Was it, you know, I think y'all mentioned a little bit that you were able to fly through it or not, but
I want to go last. I call going last now.
I did my time.
Becca, you go first.
Okay.
You're the writer of the group.
Okay.
What did you think about the author's writing style?
To answer my own question first, I enjoyed her writing style. I think that, and Angela, this is kind of a question I had for you specifically in terms of how you felt like she wrote such dark and sad experiences from a therapist point of view. Like, do you feel like she captured trauma and the internal monologue that can go through somebody's head when they're experiencing something like that? And I think from a reader's perspective that has no professional opinion on it, I thought it was beautifully done. I really I felt everything. And I think if you continue to read the series, you feel it 10 times over. And so I feel like this is just a taste of what she's capable of to write trauma. So I love her writing style. I mean, I mentioned it a few moments ago, but dual POV, that's my jam. Like, please give me dual POV. And so I loved it. I loved her writing. I appreciated the art that was the book itself.
Just kind of going off of what you said, Becca, when I thought about her writing style, I didn't necessarily think about the trauma aspect of it. I like that she was able to, kind of intertwine it in such a beautiful way where, it wasn't the main focus, but it was a very big focal point of the story. Where, you get that puppy love that the two characters are having, and she captures that so well. Their dynamic. Of the flirting and the back and forth, and then she weaves it in a way that it's like it's a tough topic, but it makes it so it's like you can digest it, I guess, because it's not necessarily an easy thing to read about, but she weaves it in a very balanced way, and so I'll commend her on that. I really liked that, how she did that, how she handled that. So Angela.
Yeah. No. I completely agree with the both of you. In terms of like the writing around the trauma, like I think it was very balanced and made it digestible, because I think it was just kind of sprinkled in. I know like the last chapter, and we'll talk about like the cliffhanger, was probably like the toughest to read, but it was just kind of sprinkled in. And I thought she actually went kind of light on the trauma in some aspects. And because I think even just imagining Shannon and everything that she grew up with, like her entire life, there was only one mention of having thoughts of like self-harm or unaliving herself. And I think in her circumstances, that would have been maybe more prevalent, especially considering like how tiny she was and how she just felt so fragile. And it was like constant fear, constant trauma, like at home, like almost like no reprieve from it. Like I would have thought that would have been more present in a character like that, but I think it just speaks to like that this is YA, and it is just sprinkled in, and it's digestible and balanced. But I thought it was written well in that sense of it being more balanced and digestible, because I guess it is YA and it's meant to be YA.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right too, because of the, she has it at home, but then also in school, she's constantly bullied, so that, like you said, there's no reprieve. I did a small reread. I didn't get to reread the entire story. I mean, it is a long book, but I'm glad that I reread it, especially talking about this and talking about the trauma and talking about how she writes it. Because I remember when I first read it, and she was talking about at school and the bullying and the throwing up, and all of that. Like, I didn't make the connection of it being, anxiety throwing up. I don't think the word anxiety was mentioned in the book, but after I reread it again, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, she was throwing up and so thin, she doesn't have that, and those are things that I guess as an adult, you can kind of put the two and two together. But even on my first reread, I was like, why is she throwing up so much? And I don't know. But yes, I'm glad I reread it. And, as the story continued to go on, and I think it's supposed to, I think you're supposed to ask, what's going on with her. It's the same as like Johnny. He's like, he can tell something is affecting her. He doesn't know to what, scope, but to what degree. But yeah, it's present and it's sprinkled in, like you said, Angela. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think, you mentioned that, you feel like it was light, and that like, she didn't go, but as the series progresses, it gets way deeper and way darker. And so, I think that this is just like a taste of what she is capable of writing in terms of like trauma and and things like that. And so I think that it's worth continuing to read should you decide to. But it is a lot and it is heavy. I will say the second book, I don't think I've ever cried harder in a book than I cried reading Keeping 13. Chloe Walsh's range is so good too, because she can write those heavy trauma moments, but then she has characters like Gypsy, who are like one of like the funniest characters I've ever read, you know, and their flirtatious banter and all of this. And so I feel like she has a good range as an author. And you kind of get a little bit of everything in her books. And so I love her writing style.
Yeah. There's another piece. I know it's a sensitive topic, but I liked how she wrote it. The piece about how the mom had a miscarriage, and it talks about all of the inner emotions that Shannon and her brother went through with that news. And I think she did a good job of showing like this isn't a black and white issue. Like it's very gray and there's so much nuance to it.
Yes.
And there's a lot of sides to a miscarriage in their situation,
Right.
in their family life and their family dynamic. And so that experience of the mom having a miscarriage brought up complicated feelings for Shannon and Joey. But like they were at some point relieved that the miscarriage happened, because the alternative would have been another child born into a really, really hard family dynamic.
Right.
And at the same time feeling, I think, shame and guilt for having that relief,
right,
because it is such a devastating thing to have the loss of a child. And so, but it's so real, I think, and so nuanced, and so such a gray topic in this situation.
Yeah, no, I feel like she wrote it as respectfully as she could for the, you know, but also as real as someone who was in that situation would feel.
Yeah. Yes. Talk about perspectives. I mean, you get all the perspectives, all of the dynamics. I mean, even with the younger kids too. You do get like a feel for, you know, what their experience was like as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I will say one more thing about her writing.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. So my only critique of...
it might be my critique. I made sure to write it down because I was like, I cannot forget this. But okay. Yes.
Well, maybe I'll be interested to hear what your critique is. So my critique of her writing, I do feel like this book was a little bit, it could have been shorter. It just felt more fluffy, and it was a lot of fluff for me and not enough plot to forward like the length of the book. And I felt like almost every single conversation could have been cut in half. And there's like so much dialogue, like so much inner dialogue. And it was like saying a whole lot of nothing sometimes. And so that's my only critique of like, I feel like it could have been condensed.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. I don't agree, but I think that's fair. I you know, I agree to a certain degree, because I felt like it was necessary in building what they have. Because if you think about it in high school, and you think about the amount of times you talk to the boy that you like before either of you starts to say like, okay, I like you too, like obviously that you know they like each other, but then. Yeah, so I totally agree, but like I remember being like, oh, she ran into his chest, or she ran into this big brick wall. Oh, she did that a couple of chapters ago.
He drove her home. He drove her home.
Yeah.
How many times did he drive her home?
It's like, which time did he stop her in the hallway? Which time are you talking about? I see what you're saying.
And it wasn't necessarily between Johnny and Shannon, the dialogue that I felt was too long. I think it was all the other ones, like the one conversation between Johnny and his mom about like, what does Shannon mean to you? Let me have the talk with you. It just felt sometimes dragged. Or Shannon had a conversation with Claire, and that conversation just felt a little bit too long for me. So, but I think the ones between her and Johnny made sense to me. I should specify, like not the between them two, but it's like all the extra ones. Yeah. And like the scene with like the cat and like Gibbsy's cat, I was like, why are we talking about this cat? I know it like plays a little bit later. Do you Becca,
I liked that scene.
I love that scene.
I liked that scene.
Why?
I don't think you're appreciating Gypsy as much as you should. I could tell from your face when I said that Gypsy was the funniest character I've ever read. You were like, And I was like, okay, she's like not Gypsy. A Gypsy fan.
Yeah.
But I like Gypsy.
I think those type of scenes provided comedic relief when we really needed it. And I think that they're, you know, I agree in that the book felt a little long. Like the book was like, I remember just reading it, I was like, damn, like I'm only 40% through. But, and like I've seen it on Book Talk too, where people say like, oh my gosh, it's 700 pages. Is it really worth it? And people will come and be like, and it's not enough. And that's how I feel. Like I could not get enough of this. I didn't want it to end. And I don't feel that way about a lot of books. A lot of books, like once I get to a certain point, I'm like, all right, let's wrap this up because I'm already thinking about what I want to read next. So to me, like it wasn't enough. And I loved every minute and every dialogue. And I think too, and I know I keep saying this, but like if you continued on in the series, like the depth, because it's so long and because you have so many interactions with all these different characters, as those characters develop throughout the series, like the depth that you get is necessary to feel the things that you have to feel for them later. If you don't have enough experiences with them and enough interactions and lengthy interactions, then you don't care about those characters later on or as much as you really need to. And so I think that you kind of have to read on, I think, to really understand why she did that. But yeah.
What did y'all think of the friend characters, the two friend characters? Because I felt as, at least in this story and the little bit that I've read in the second book, I felt like I didn't get enough differentiation other than like Claire was Gibbsy's, crush, right? I wish there was a little bit more. I know they had a scene where like they were helping her like with her makeup and stuff like that. And so, but like maybe even more of that.
Yeah. No, I think you're right on that. I think it plays on like Shannon has some trust issues, like major trust issues because of the bullying that she's experienced because, so she I think that as the series goes on and as like you get even further into keeping 13, like she lets some of those guards down, but I think it plays into like she doesn't quite open up to them fully yet. She doesn't allow herself to like have a found family yet. But as the series goes on, like they do have that found family, and it's and it becomes a really like interesting dynamic and stuff. So it does it again. It kind of like, and that's why I feel like Binding 13 and Keeping 13. It's the same book. It's just literally split in half. So that's why it's like I feel like if you don't read Keeping 13, then you don't really get a full appreciation of Binding 13, I guess. So yeah. So you do get more of that. So it is, I mean, it's a valid critique of just Binding 13. Yeah.
That's interesting that you have this perspective, Becca, of like reading the second book. Because it sounds like this book is just, I like how you described it. It's like it's one book, but just split into two.
Yeah.
And so we weren't meant to get the depth that maybe we're missing in this first book.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yes. And that's, and that speaks to a choice from Chloe Walsh. Like, I mean, she may have lost some people because they didn't think to pick up the second book because they didn't get that depth from the first one. So for all those that have read it and haven't picked up the second one because you felt like you've been missing that, just know that it does, like, everything comes to head in the second one, and it's deeper than you probably even signed up for. Like, you'll get plenty of depth in that one. So
yeah.
So,
I did like the bits that we saw between Shannon and Claire. I think there was like one phone conversation where it's like Claire just like understands like why Shannon can't do something. I think there's an understanding. She doesn't push, she doesn't press Shannon to disclose anymore. And then like the makeup situation that you brought up, Cassandra, it's like no questions asked. Like let's just kind of let me help you, let me support you here in this moment. So I did like those pieces.
There were like boundaries, they kind of knew where the boundaries were. And like Johnny was learning those boundaries, and eventually he started to respect them. He was like, okay, I've gone too far. And so like the friends, they kind of already knew those boundaries. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So I guess another kind of question, I don't want to say, I'll say it's a critique. Shannon, she went through a lot of abuse, and it was clear for Johnny to see. He described the marks that she had on her, and he saw them. And so my biggest critique / question was like, what were the teachers doing in this situation? What were the counselors doing in this situation? How did they not notice what was going on with her? But my hope would be that, like, if a child was in this situation, those people in those positions would notice and would, do
Intervene.
some sort of, yes, intervention. That was my thing. Like, what were these adults doing?
Yeah, well, I think,
And
they
why?
mention like that they went into like the system at one point and
Mm,
it was not good. So they learned to lie. They learned
yeah.
to do whatever they had to do to keep out of the system. So she may have
Mm-hmm.
like alluded to the fact that they do get questioned about, from teachers, from whatever. There were other things that could answer for where those marks were coming from. And I think that if they did get questioned, they learned how to lie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I wish there was, like, at least just one
somebody
tiny
caring.
scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody, I mean, that's my only thing is, like, it makes sense, and I get that the kids, like, they were so used to lying and hiding and things like that, but it was just so obvious, like, at least when she had the marks on her neck, I was like, that's really hard to hide,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
uh,
And I
I wish
think
there was one little snippet of a teacher or a counselor, kind of reaching
somebody.
out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I didn't
Just
think
even
about that.
asking the question and then showing her, like, lying, showing her being good at lying to these two adults and things like that.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of mention
So,
of teachers at
yeah.
all, just the coaches.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's valid, and I didn't even think about it, but it makes so much sense. Even outside of like the physical appearance and like the physical signs of like the abuse, like even mentally, like how anxious she was all the time. I guess she hid the puking, but like even those signs, I feel like would have
Yeah.
caused red flags or should have caused red flags for
Right.
somebody.
Anyway, so that was the only tidbit I wanted to add for that part of, like, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the characters a little bit specifically. Like what was the character that left an impression on you? Who is your favorite character from the book so far?
Yeah, I'll go first. I really liked Johnny for the aspect of sports and like just his characteristics about sports, like how disciplined he was, how driven he was, how the self-control and just how concentrated and like this passion for like he was so like Gibbsy calls him like a bulldozer, and it was so true with his sport too, of like, no, this is what I need to do, and it's just like that determination I think was really something that I really enjoyed seeing in a character. And so opposite of that, I know you didn't ask this question, Becca, but I'm going to mention it because it's something that I thought of, because like also like Shannon's character, and I know this is like a part of the plot and the story and like it was meant to be this way, but I didn't see a lot of development in her character. Like she was just this fragile, anxious girl, tiny, literally from beginning she was a fragile, anxious girl, and at the end she was a fragile, anxious girl. And so that kind of bothered me, and I didn't like that. I guess there were some minor moments of like, no, Shannon, like you need to fight back, like no, Shannon, you need to like not run away. So it's starting, I guess, but it's such a long book, and I feel like I didn't get any development to her character, but I love Johnny's character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that's totally valid. You're right. If read Keeping 13 and get to the end and you'll have a different perspective on that. Because the whole book, like Binding and Keeping 13 takes place over like a year and a half maybe. And so but Binding 13 is such a short time. So it's like, I think, like give her some time and read the next book and then you'll probably have a different opinion. But again, for those that may not pick it up because of that, that they wouldn't know that. So that's a critique on a writing choice. If you're going to make a sequel, like make it maybe the same book, like part 2 or something, to where like people know that like I'm not going to get the full scope of these character developments of these, whatever. So that's maybe a critique for that. But I agree with that. Yeah, you don't see a whole lot of development from her.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's like, I kind of would have wanted the development, but her character just comes in already like just with so much
She has so
that
far
I
to
feel
go.
like yes,
Yeah.
the bullying and stuff, especially like with Bella, right? In that moment I'm like, stick up for yourself, but it would be hard to see her actually stick up to this big bully like Bella when I wouldn't buy it. Let's just say that. I wouldn't buy it because I'm like, no, you've been bullied your entire life. And now this one bully you're going to stick up against? I don't buy it. No. Yeah. Like I kind of see what you're saying. And I think that's why you actually liked Johnny so much is because Johnny, his story in general just has so much development. You know, his torn adductor that, you know, he starts with such a struggle. He starts with something to overcome. And it's an interesting thing to watch him overcome.
Yeah. And I don't mean, and I wouldn't expect, especially knowing there's a second book to this, I wouldn't expect her to be like this almighty, so powerful, like nobody's going to talk down to me. No, but I think like little bits and pieces, even like in her inner monologue dialogue, in her inner dialogue, like I would have liked to see that a little bit more developed, like just thinking differently and like, oh, I'm not going to let this get to me, like things like that.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
Yeah. But coming back to y'all's favorite character, I know always lean towards the negative.
Yeah. Like, and Shannon sucks. Like, she's like gone through so much. Like,
no, she does not suck. Can we say things we like about Shannon? Let's say things we like about Shannon.
Yes.
You know what I like about Shannon, Angela? No, I'm just kidding. Like? No, I agree with you. No, it's like she's got a static storyline. Yes, I agree.
Yes, that's the good way to put it. A static storyline. And it could have gone so much further.
Yeah, that's fair.
But what do y'all like about Shannon?
What I like about Shannon is it's like with Johnny, she does kind of show a little bit of that, like, I don't care what you say. She's like, no, like you're in pain. You're obviously going through something, and I'm not going to stand down. I care about the fact that you're in pain, and I'm not just going to let it slide. Like, I'm going to call you out on it. And I liked that part of her, that she was like the one person that he kind of like, it kind of grounded him a little bit. I like that she brought that out in him. So I liked that about her. I also liked that she was a book carrier, if you remember.
Yes.
You know, when they were in her bedroom, like stacks of books and stuff. And so had that little connection there. But
yes.
What else do we like about Shannon?
I love that she loves music. She has a lot of emotions to music. That's how she channels it. I also love about Shannon, I love that she loved Johnny for who he is and not for the athlete in him. I think she appreciated that about him, but I think Johnny could not be a famous rugby player and she wouldn't care. And that, I feel like that's genuine. That's not just like being a pick-me girl, like, I don't care that you play sports, but really actually caring. Like, no, like she genuinely does not care. And I love that about her, that she was like, I want to take care of Johnny. I don't want to take care of rugby star Johnny. I want to take care of just Johnny. And I think that, and you see that even more as the books go on. And so I think that's probably one of my favorite parts of her. And also just the fact that she's, as much as it frustrates me that she's not willing to like go to the authorities, get help, do whatever. I also love that she's so scared for her younger siblings and like them ending up in the system and something bad happening to them, that she's willing to take the brunt of abuse in order to protect them. And I think that, you know, that shows a strength that I'll never, thank God, and God willing, will never have to understand. So I do, you know, I appreciate that about her too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with everything that y'all said. I think the only thing I can add is like her banter, like once she started like letting her guard down and like how she was kind of like testing Johnny a little bit. I like to see that. And also like the way that she's a pro at PlayStation.
Oh, yeah, that was funny.
She showed up Johnny and he was like, what in the world? Like, where did this girl come from?
Yeah.
So that was cute. I like that.
Like she's hot. She could play video games. She's hot.
Yeah.
Or I think Gibbsy said that. Like, whoa, that's sexy. And Johnny's like, get out of my car.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That was cute.
Oh, I love it.
You can tell. It makes you think. Like, it makes you wonder if the author had any sort of like connection to that too. Like what was it GTA that they played?
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto, yeah.
Yeah, I never played that, but I
Mm-mm.
mean, I was that girl that was like, "Oh, I play video games,"
Mhm.
but I wasn't like telling everybody about it. It was I had brothers and stuff, so like, yeah, I had that connection to Shannon. I forgot that she played games. I'm so
Yes. Yes, yeah.
so glad you mentioned that. Yeah,
Mhm.
just a well-rounded just person.
Yes. Yeah. Any other characters that we are like super loving?
I do like the mom.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I like how like she cared about this goes with Shannon. I like the mom. I like how she genuinely cared about Johnny, and she was kind of the same as Shannon. She cared about Johnny, not rugby Johnny.
Yeah.
And that's why I think he was so drawn to Shannon, because they were just kind of a lot alike. And I think even the mom kind of noticed.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, she was just so just like anytime they were together, she was genuinely just asking like how he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Poor guy. Like, why did he hide his injury so long?
I know.
Poor guy.
He thought he didn't have a choice, you know.
Yeah.
But there's always a choice. There's
Always a choice. Man, if he would have done it sooner, but
Yeah.
then we wouldn't have
we
this.
wouldn't have a book.
Anyway,
So.
exactly.
But yeah, yeah, no, I love his parents, and you get even more of them in the second book, and they are everything that I want to be as a mom. And I aspire to be everything that Johnny's mom is. I think that she is wonderful. So yeah, she's one of my favorite characters too.
Yeah.
But I love Gypsy and Claire. I think that they have like they're dynamic, and I think Gypsy has a lot more depth like to him that you guys will see if you finish the series. I just feel like his comedic relief and like his banter with Johnny is just there. Like I was physically laughing out loud. I love who he is as a person and as a friend to Johnny, to Shannon, to Joey, to everybody. I love him. Yes.
Yeah, it's just top tier, like friendship. Like they have each other's backs, and you can tell they know each other so well, and it's so natural and like brotherly for them. So that was really special to see.
Yes.
I really think that Gibbsy, for being a side character, he was so important to the story, and it wasn't just fluff. It was purposeful and it was entertaining, and it wasn't just like a forgettable person. He is Gibbsy, and I liked that. He was good. Yes.
So Cassandra, you mentioned Johnny was your favorite character. Tell us why. I'm sorry, I cut you off earlier.
No, you're good. Johnny, he has so many good moments to offer this story. He is just like the highlight of it for me. So like, yes, Gibbsy, comedic relief, but their moments on the bus together.
That was a good scene.
Like they literally had uninterrupted conversation together, just connecting and through music and sharing music together on the bus. And that was just such I love the way it was such an intimate moment without like the intimacy, if that makes sense, and she even saw his playlist for her. He's just such a sweet boy, so caring, so just don't touch him,
boy.
He is just like undeniably just so sweet. And I know that we texted about this, Becca, where it's like he could come off as very like creepy and like overbearing. And like I feel like if I didn't have his point of view, I definitely would think that. But that's why I loved his point of view. Like he was like, all right, Shannon, go to the car. It's time for you to go to the car so that I can like when they're at the pub or whatever. He's like, all right, Shannon, do me a favor, go to the car. Can you settle the bill and like go to the car and I'll be right there. And then he turns around on the bullies and he like he flipped the table over, and then he's like, don't when he said don't like mess with my girlfriend. And like I was like, she is not your girlfriend, but man, like I love this.
Yeah.
I freaked out. I was like, I can't believe he called her his girlfriend. Like, oh my
That's that YA, really getting into the mindset there. Yes.
Yeah. And then for him to go on and like she tries to kiss him and then he like doesn't kiss back. Like he's just like chokes. He's like, ugh. But it was like obviously you like her. Oh my gosh. And then they go to the movies and they have their little movie date and it's like, oh, want to hold hands. Okay, just put your legs on me. Oh, you scared? Okay, I'll help you during these scared parts. Such a cliche, but I ate it up. Like it was, yes, it was like there. I was like, I've had moments like this, and it was she did such a good job writing it, and I just connected so deeply to it, especially the movie. Like mine and my husband's first date was a movie. We went to see Woman in Black, which is like a scary movie. It's got Daniel Radcliffe in it.
Oh,
Interestingly, call back to our Harry Potter episode. Shout out if you haven't listened to our Harry Potter episode, listen to it. But yeah, so we went and we saw a movie for our first date, and so it just kind of reminded me of that. Oh, he's like, oh, she's scared. Like, don't worry, I'll protect you. And he, it's funny because my husband was like, he was like, I'll protect you. We can. But he's just as terrified of scary movies too. So we both kind of were like, screaming at the little moments. And it wasn't even that scary of a movie anyway, but we still had that, that newness of like, oh, should we hold hands? Like, he bought me my movie snacks and just the perfect first date. So I just loved that. Like I was the way that she wrote those moments, it was just perfect. And so cliche, but just perfect. I have no other words.
Yes.
I love Johnny.
Just love him.
Oh man. Did anybody else, the amount of times that he said Shannon like the river? Did anybody else have that song stuck in their head the entire time? Where it was like, boom, like a river every time.
No, but I will now.
Every time they said it. First time she said it, I was like, okay, like a river. Yeah. And then, the amount of times it's repeated, it literally every single time. I was like, gosh. I just need to sit down and listen to this song because
yes, get it out of your system.
And I still haven't listened to it.
Do we want to do date teammate Sinbin?
Yeah, just to be quick, but we don't have to like be entertaining. Let's just
spitfire. Spitfire, go.
Okay, I would date Johnny. Claire is my teammate, and I'm sending Shannon to the Sinbin.
Ma'am, get out!
She has been through so much.
Has she not been through enough?
Okay, she needs 2 minutes of timeout so she can read a self-development book. No, I'm kidding.
Wow.
Oh my god, I can't even think straight.
Angela?
What?
Shame.
Okay.
Shame.
I'm sending you to the Sinbin in a minute.
Oh
and Sinbin is just like a timeout, isn't it?
It is just a timeout.
I'm giving her a safe space to go to so she can chill from her anxiety.
Like that was so messed up. You said so she can read a self-help book.
That was messed up, and I did it.
You are the therapist of this group, and
that was me being cheeky. Okay. She needs a timeout to give her some space to calm down from her anxiety. Okay, she needs a safe space. So I'm sending her to the Sinbin.
Valid, but I still wouldn't do it.
No.
Okay, Spitfire. Come on,
talk about sending her over the edge. Okay.
No, it's to calm down. Go over there. Sit down for a second. Chill. Breathe.
It just threw me off guard because Sinbin is the replacement for Kill.
No, this
Avada Kedavra.
No, this is Sinbin. Okay, this is
Sinbin is strictly a rugby term where they go and they take a timeout. Okay, and
that's what Shannon needs from time to time. She needs to breathe so she doesn't end up throwing up.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. Anyways,
I'm starting to like your answer. Okay, Becca.
Okay, I would date Gibbsy. My teammate would be Johnny's mom, and my send to the sin bin would be Bella, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, Bella. Yeah. We didn't really even talk about her, but
no, we're not a fan of Bella. Okay, go, Cassandra.
I get you. Valid. Your answers were really good, Becca. I would date Johnny. Teammate, my teammate was Shannon because I feel like she just is a person that wouldn't give up. right? She'd always be there for me. My sin bin person, you guys, my sin bin person was Dee, the secretary, the lady at the beginning of the story.
Oh, such
Ew.
a good answer.
Disgusting,
Yeah.
disgusting
Such a good
woman.
answer. Valid.
Yeah, she needs to go.
Yes.
She needs more of a timeout. She needs to go.
Yes.
She needs to go to timeout and go and get
Yes.
fired. Boom,
Yes.
you're fired.
Yeah.
And just for clarification, I know we're saying that we would date these people, but we would date them as if we were also high schoolers. Okay, we need to put apparently we need to put that disclaimer out there in case this does make it into the episode. Please put the disclaimer on there that we are saying we would date them if we were also in high school. Okay?
Yeah.
We would not date them now as 30-something-year-old women.
Yeah.
And they were still 16, 17-year-old.
Absolutely not.
Okay?
Okay. Yes. As a teenager in high school, this one's for you.
Now this has to go in the episode because
that is so important.
Okay.
That is so important to say. Obviously, not at this age.
Yes.
It's if we were teenagers and these characters existed in our high school, what would we do? Okay. I feel like that goes without being said, but for some,
but apparently needs to be said. So there you go. Trolls.
Thank you, Becca.
Okay.
We love them.
Okay. Good answers. Good game. Okay. Let's talk about the ending. Let's talk about the cliffhanger. Now this is, I can't really speak on too much because I've read on, right? And Cassandra's read on a little bit. So Angela, really, the question is for you. How did the cliffhanger leave you? Did it make you want to pick up the next book, or what were your thoughts?
The cliffhanger was intense. Like that last whole chapter was super duper intense, and probably the most intense of the whole entire book. And Cassandra, you actually mentioned this way earlier, and I had the exact same thought, but I wanted to save it to this part of the episode. Is I think what made it so much more intense was because we saw the little kiddos, the younger siblings, be a part of that event, and just how much it also is traumatizing them, and how they are being scarred by that too, being so young and so little. And I think that was just heartbreaking. And it's probably, I don't know why, but I felt more for them than I did. Well, I mean, I felt for Shannon as well, but I don't know. I think it added a whole other layer of like these young, tiny, super innocent. And I know Shannon's innocent too, but it's just a different perspective, I think, with little babies, little children seeing this and also wanting to intervene and putting themselves in the middle of it. And that's just heartbreaking. So this is definitely devastating.
Yes. Did it make you want to continue to read?
Well, I think this goes into our next question. So are you ready to talk about
our signature question? Would you carry it with pride? Would you keep it in your bag? You kind of like it, don't really need to have it all the time. Keep it on your bookshelf, but maybe not pick it up again. Or would you donate it to somebody that would more likely like that type of genre?
I think it's obvious for me, just throughout our episode and all of the shining moments that I loved. I would definitely carry it for sure. And I will carry it for our listeners out there. I'm carrying it right now. And I love it so much.
Just sleep with it next to her in bed.
Oh, it was such a wonderful experience. Just the nostalgia aspect of it, and the even to the trauma, it was the way that it was built. It was fantastic. I would carry it.
Good answer. I think everybody's anticipated Angela's answer, so I'm going to go next so Angela can finish it out. I think this might be surprising, but I think I would keep it on my bookshelf. I don't know if I would, knowing what happens in the rest of the series. I feel like the series gets like, if I could carry them all, then I would. But if I had to like compare, then these don't even like touch Joey's books in my opinion. And so to me, it's like, oh, but there's so much better out there in the series that like I read it and I'll probably put it on my bookshelf and it will always hold a place in my heart. But that's probably, it's a mid for me. And I think, but if you ask me about keeping 13 and the full story of Johnny and Shannon, I would carry it with pride. So you asked me about keeping 13, I'd probably carry that one. But this one I probably would just, because I feel like you said, Angela, it doesn't get deep enough yet to really appreciate it. And so that's why I think it would go on my bookshelf or stay in my bag.
That's valid. Well, let me ask you this. So if you hadn't, and I guess I don't know how you can even imagine it, but if you hadn't read the second one, do you think this one would be like a carry for you?
Yeah.
Or no?
Yeah. Because I think I wouldn't know yet how much better it's even going to get. Because I obviously loved it enough to... So I guess that kind of changes my answer. If I'm going about it from the perspective that this is the only book, and because it's the only book we're going to cover from the series, then I would carry it. But knowing what I know now, I probably would keep it on my shelf. But it was great enough for me to, same thing like Cassandra. I mean, I was like, download the next one before I could even think. I was like, I just want to figure out what happened.
Yeah, that's fair. That's valid. So yeah, for me, I'm going to be a mood reader for this one. And I think that's important to say because I could see myself in the right headspace needing a book like this where for me it felt, and Becca, like I know you're saying like if I continue reading it'll be a different experience, but like with this book, it felt honestly fluffy to me, and it felt like a comfort read, even though I know there's like the trauma aspects to it and things, and it gets dark at times, but it did feel like a fluffy comfort fun read for me, almost like a palate cleanser. Because for me, if I'm carrying a book, it means that I can immediately, in the way I interpret this question for our rating is like, I want to reread it. I want to immediately like pick it up and like consume it all over again. And I would have to be in the headspace to want a fluffy comfort read for me where like fun dialogue and the real characters. And so I'm in between letting someone borrow it and then having it in my bag.
Yeah.
Ready to access it when I'm in the right headspace for it.
Yeah. I really like, and I know I mentioned this so many times, but I really like think if you read on, you would have a different appreciation for it. I think since you were like, this isn't your normal genre and your normal book style that you like, that you reach for. I think that you still enjoyed it to a certain extent. I think that you really would enjoy definitely keeping 13 and then Joey's books too. I think that like that depth that you're maybe wanting a little bit more, like, I mean, you love Manacled, and I think that speaks to like the type of like depth that you need from stories and from books. And I think you get more of that as you go. You just haven't quite reached that yet. So just from like my perspective, I think you would really enjoy it if you want to keep going, but the books are long and it is like, again, you have to be in the right mood for it. So, that's just my honest suggestion.
Yeah, no, and I think I will eventually read them. Especially Joey's book, kind of everything that you've shared and like his character. It's like, I think you told me at one point, like he's like the real version of like a Draco Malfoy.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, that kind of sold me on it. So I will eventually read it. But even with the cliffhanger, I wasn't like itching to like, okay, I'm going to read the next one. Like it still didn't do it for me. So, but I will eventually. I know, isn't that weird? But it kind of felt predictable. Maybe that's why I was like, "Oh, this is eventually going to come to a head, and it's going to get real bad." And so
it sure did. Yeah, and I just like I had to know like what happened to her. I had to know like because it sounded like she was close to death.
Yeah.
So I was like, I needed to read on and make sure she was okay and find out. And so that's why I read on. But I like what you said, Angela, about being in the right space or the right mood for it. That's what I loved about it so much. It was just, I read this while reading also Onyx Storm. And I loved reading this and picking it up and just like being able to just pick it up and go. And it was no nonsense. It was just right. It was just exactly what I needed. And so that's why I think that's another reason why I'm such a book carrier for this one. And I love it so much. And so I like what you said. I agree. I agree.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair.
Thank you, Becca, for this book recommendation.
Oh yeah. No, it was so much fun. I'm so glad.
It.
I sent the girls a video whenever I was reading it, just like almost in tears. And I was like, can y'all please read this? Because I need to talk to somebody about it. And then we were like, well, why not put it on the pod, So it was, thank y'all so much for agreeing to read it and going on the journey with me. I can't wait to hear what y'all think about the rest of the series. I don't think we're going to cover it on the podcast. Maybe we will at some point, but we're going to, for those who don't want to read the series, we don't want to tie up episodes, 6 or 7 episodes for the rest of the series. So if you guys do listen or do read on, definitely comment on our stuff and let us know and interact with us and let us know how you feel as you move through the series, because I definitely want to hear y'all's thoughts. So yeah. And then next week, we'll be back with another Book Yappy episode, and we're actually going to dive into Quicksilver. So we're super excited about that, going back into the fantasy realm. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Again, we are so appreciative. All the comments, likes, interactions, shares. We love it. We see every single one of them because there aren't many yet, but we still, whether there were 1,000 of them or 2 of them, we will read through them because we love it. We love the community, and we thank you guys so much. So thank y'all so much. Have a great week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Book Carriers.
We hope you enjoyed diving into this week's read with us as much as we did.
Thank you so much for joining us on this literary adventure. Your support means the world to us.
If you loved today's episode, don't forget to follow us on social media for updates, behind-the-scene fun, and more bookish content.
And if you're feeling generous, please rate our podcast 5 stars. Your reviews help other book carriers find us and join our growing community.
Remember, we'll be back with a new episode every week, catching up on our latest read.
Until next time, keep reading and living those amazing stories.
Bye for now.
Happy reading!
I've